All right. Well, I think let's go ahead and get started with kind of some introductions, and I imagine we'll keep having people join as we go here. Um, yeah, let's get going. So, good morning, everyone. It's so nice to see all of you on the call, and it was really exciting to see all of the interest from across the state on this topic. It's a topic for reasons you'll find out more about soon. It's a topic we're really interested in and excited about right now as well. So we've been looking forward to this conversation for a while. My name is Jenna Koloski. I'm the Community Engagement and Policy Director with the Vermont Council on Rural Development. Um, and this is one of our Vermont Community Leadership Network workshops. So some of you have been around for a while with VCLN and some may be newer to it. This is really this is a space, a group, a network that kind of actually formed around COVID response and recovery back in 2020. But we kind of quickly realized that there was a real appetite and interest in coming together, community leaders, community builders, folks that are serving and working with communities, coming together in a regular way to share best practices, to network, to connect with each other, and to learn together about opportunities that are out there, resources, strategies. So every month, every couple of months, we hold one of these workshops on a topic that we're really seeing or that we're hearing is really important to community leaders and builders around the state. Um, if you visit our website, vtrural.org, you will see that we have upcoming workshops. So we have some future workshops coming up on kind of revisiting, 10 months later after the flooding this summer, revisiting where we are in recovery and looking at the long-term recovery and strategies. We always have a legislative roundup at the end of the session. So you can look at future opportunities. We also have a big statewide summit for community builders and leaders that we hold on it'll be on August 6th this year. That's about usually 500 or 600 people coming together from around the state. So some opportunities, but also the website has all of our past workshops that we've held over the last 4 years. So consider that a resource if you're looking for information on grant writing and community engagement and a whole variety of tools and resources and skills. But today, our focus is all about the role of community trusts, or sometimes they're called village trusts, community or village trust, in community and economic development in Vermont. Many of you have probably seen for a long time, there's been community trust around the state, but it feels like there's been kind of a rising trend of these trusts forming to create the capacity outside of or alongside municipal government to take on projects and initiatives in the community. This is a topic I see, we have Preservation Trust of Vermont, we have Kate from Vermont Community Foundation. VCRD is actually partnering with the Vermont Community Foundation and Preservation Trust of Vermont to pretty soon launch a significant initiative that will help to foster the formation of or strengthening of community trust and bring resources to communities that are taking on transformational projects in their community. Nicole will talk more about that later. It's not launched yet, but it's kind of a coming soon. So you're getting a sneak peek today with this new initiative. So we're not going to be able to answer every question about it or share all of the details, but we can kind of share a little bit of early information as we get started with that. But really the purpose today is not just to focus on that initiative, but to speak more broadly about, well, what is a community trust and what is the value that that can bring to your town? What are some best practice and strategies? What are maybe some challenges that communities that have stood up these trusts, what have they encountered? But most importantly, celebrating what they've accomplished. And there's some really great success stories, and we're bringing you a few today. So let's go ahead and dive into it. The intention today is we do have Nicole Gratton from Preservation Trust of Vermont. She's coming with a lot of expertise around what is a community trust, and of course Preservation Trust provides a lot of technical assistance and support to communities standing these up and using trust to accomplish projects. So we'll hear from her, but we also have Ann Ryder with us, Deb Fuller, and Trevor Braun. I'm going to have them each introduce themselves, but they are all community leaders, I think probably all volunteers in their community that have led these initiatives and can speak to their experiences completing some really exciting projects in their own town. So I think what we'll do is start by having each of our panelists introduce yourself and share, any affiliation you want to share, and just a quick overview of the organization or trust that you represent. And if you want to mention a key project, and then we'll dive more into the details a little later. But let's start with those introductions. So Nicole, do you want to go first?
Sure. My name is Nicole Gratton. I'm representing Preservation Trust of Vermont today. And the work that I do with PTV is around their community supported enterprise program and the soon to launch Village Trust initiative. I hail from Derby, Vermont, so I love the Northeast Kingdom, and this work that we get to do is really going to help me get into other parts of the state and see all of the great work that is happening throughout Vermont. So thank you for having me today.
Thank you, Nicole. As you were talking, I realized I forgot some logistical things before I call on other folks. So just wanted to say really quickly that we are going to stay on mute for now as we work through the panel. If you want to see people like featured on your screen, make sure you select the view, like the speaker view, and that way, as the panelists talk, they'll kind of be featured up on your screen. And then I did want to make it clear that we are planning to take some time for questions at the end. So just hold on to your questions, and we'll have kind of a facilitated conversation once the panelists finish. And Lauren is really going to be helping track raised hands and questions in the chat and that kind of thing. Okay, thank you, Nicole. Anne, do you want to say hello?
Hi, I'm Ann Ryder. I hail from the southeast corner of the state, Guilford, and I'm the president of the Friends of Algiers Village Trust, Friends of Algiers Village Incorporated, which is our little village trust.
Thank you. Deb, go ahead.
Hi, thanks for having me. My name's Debra Fuller, and I am in Rupert, Vermont, and I am the treasurer of Rupert Village Trust. And Rupert is in the southwest corner of the state, so a little north of Bennington. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And Trevor.
Hi, I'm Trevor Braun. I'm a trustee on the Elmore Community Trust Board of Trustees, and we've taken on the preservation of the Elmore store here in Elmore, a little town in right on the edge of the Northeast Kingdom.
Great. Well, thanks so much, everyone. So I think to get us started, before we dive into the details of kind of the origin of each of those trusts, and you will notice we were kind of intentional about trying to find some examples that are along a spectrum of maybe some that have been around longer and taken on a couple different projects, to some that are a little newer and fresher in their formation and recent completion of some projects. So we can hear from different sides of that spectrum. But why don't we start, Nicole, by having you kick us off with, like, what is a community trust? What do we mean when we say a trust, and what role can they play?
Yeah, so I'm going to kind of put like our Vermont lens on this definition. I'm sure there's broader definitions, but for here and what we're talking about today, a community trust is a 501c3 organization with a locally based mission to revitalize and sustain our rural, vibrant, small communities. It's really about making all of our places in Vermont great places. Community trusts really respond to the needs of identified issues in a community, and they're able to kind of coordinate and bring resources and partners to the table to help make projects happen. A huge function of a community trust is the ability for that organization as a nonprofit to bring in donations and pool all those funds together to help drive the projects that you have. In Vermont, we see trusts serving a lot of different purposes and needs, and they often have this focus of supporting local community development. There's that historic preservation element to it, and we often see them sometimes linked with housing. So they kind of are really a response to what's happening in the community, and they often work in tandem and parallel to other actions and missions that are happening through a municipal lens. This is just another pathway to help guide a community in achieving its goals.
Great, thank you. So why don't we turn to our panelists? And actually, I did want to say something really quickly. Keziah, are you on the call? I think she is. I searched your name. I did want to quickly introduce, we don't have Keziah on the panel today, but Nicole will talk later about this Village Trust Initiative. The Vermont Council on Rural Development, our organization, has hired Keziah Haviland, who's on the call, to lead our heart, our role in the Village Trust Initiative. So for those of you interested in that work going forward, Keziah is going to be working with us over the next 5 years to make this Village Trust Initiative a reality. So just wanted to say hello and welcome to Keziah, and you'll be hearing more from her in the future. So let's go ahead and turn to our panelists to talk about your community trust. I'd love to hear, like, sometimes these community trusts have different origin stories. Like, what was the reason that you decided to go in the direction of this model to accomplish projects in your community? And why don't we'll go backwards. We'll start with Trevor, if that's okay, and share your Elmore story.
Sure. So the Elmore store is a small general store in the middle of Elmore. It's the only retail store in the town. It's about 800 people that live in Elmore. And the previous owners, after 40 years, were ready to retire. And they were very concerned about the future of the store. Having been in continuous operation for 200 years, they were worried about being the ones to not be able to pass it on and continue the operation. So they started talking with a couple folks in town about what it might look like to pass the store on to an organization. And some of the members of the community trust, before it was a community trust, reached out to some folks like Paul Brune from PTV, and it was suggested that we look at this CSE model and form a trust. So we did, and in about 14 months, we raised $400,000 in the community to purchase the store outright, and that was mostly all from just community private donations. And we purchased a store, identified a new operator, and kept the ball rolling.
Great, thanks, Trevor. Could you I'm curious to have you expand just a little bit on the fundraising component. Like, the way you just said it made it sound super easy. Maybe it was,
It was
but
nothing really.
what did that look like for you?
Well, that was it was interesting. I'd come from some other nonprofit organizations in different areas, and we were getting feedback from people who had a lot of experience with fundraising in fundraising in Vermont. But I think we began to realize that every town and every project is different, and what may work in Burlington or Middlesex or Middlebury is not necessarily going to work in a town like Elmore. So we kind of sat down and looked at who the key people in the community are, and we just started talking to people, really. And once we got a couple of folks to really get things going with some larger gifts, I think that made people feel like our goal of 400,000 was reasonable. And yeah, it was just a couple of events that we put on and some letters and emails and a lot of communication. And we partnered with some other organizations in the town that sort of reach different demographics as well. That was kind of important. So we were able to talk with people that we may not see in the store normally, but we're definitely part of the community.
Yeah, great. And there's one quick follow-up question I just saw in the chat, just because it's relevant at this moment. The store itself, somebody was just asking, like, does it feel like it's a kind of pricier store? Does it feel like it's similar to the older store? Like, what is that dynamic with the new store coming in?
It's a very small store, so there's not too much ability to change a lot. Yeah, I think the prices are probably they're the lowest they can be for a general store in a really rural town.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a tough business. It's a very tough business,
Mhm.
and also tough for us because the operators having to serve two kind of distinct populations. There's a summer population that comes into the lake. The store is right on the lake. So second homeowners coming in, and they have different tastes and needs than the local folks who are here year round and have are third generation Elmore residents. So they have to try to serve both, and it's not always easy. But I think the operator's done a very good job of striking that balance.
Great. And one more, just maybe to give a sense of the kind of scale of the fundraising. Do you have like a ballpark sense of what was kind of donations on the larger side in Elmore? Like, did you have one big cornerstone donor, or was it really a compilation of smaller donations?
I would say it was definitely a majority gifts under two or around or under 250. There were a couple of larger gifts in the um, 25 to $50,000 range, and those were sort of strategic partnerships
Mm-hmm.
and people that really believed in our work and the project, and also had
Mm-hmm.
the cash to give. But yeah, it was a lot of small gifts.
Great. Thanks, Trevor. Uh, Deb, you want to share a little bit about what's going on in Rupert?
Sure. So I would say that we are maybe in the middle stages of our trust. So Rupert Village Trust was formed in 2018, and it was formed because we saw a need in our town for a gathering place. We also saw an empty building that was right in the center of Rupert. It was the old Sheldon store building. That was a store until around the 1980s. It closed and then sat empty for a long time, and then a private homeowner bought it, and they bought it in around 2005, and then they were trying to sell it starting around, say, 2016, 2017, and it was sitting empty. It was difficult. It's a beautiful building, but it's difficult to purchase, mainly because of septic issues and the size of the land, and the fact that it came with a second building next door. It made it difficult for a individual to purchase it. So it was sitting empty, and there were several of us in town seeing this big, beautiful, empty building right in the middle of our village. And after talking to people saying, you should buy this, you should buy this, we decided that maybe we should buy it. So we formed the Village Trust. And it was, again, like Trevor said, one of my co-board members reached out to Preservation Trust of Vermont, talked with Paul Brune, and learned the model of a nonprofit being formed, the nonprofit purchasing a building and maintaining it for the community, and then eventually seeing a business operating in there. Different than Elmore in that we did not have an operating business in there already. There is a general store in West Rupert, so just a couple miles down the road. So we are looking at eventually putting a commercial kitchen in there and having it be more of a cafe restaurant. So we purchased the building, and right now we are using it as a community space, community center, having different programming going on there on a regular basis, getting people inside. Eventually, our long-term goal is to have the restaurant on a first floor, and the second floor is a big open space that we would like to continue to use for community events. So that's kind of our model and where we are. So we own the building, and we're doing programming and trying to up our programming right now, increase it a bit so that we can eventually put an addition onto the building, which we need to access the second floor. The second floor has just one staircase to it right now that is not, it's nowhere near handicap accessible. So we need to put on an addition so that we have a lift to get to the second floor. So that's going to be, that's our next biggest project. It's a hurdle.
Great. Well, thanks, Deb. Well, I
Mhm.
one maybe a follow-up, because I'm seeing some questions in the chat, and we will try and get to more of these, but just as they pop up, if they feel relevant, I'll build them in. That could you talk a little bit about the actual process of forming the trust itself? You know, what somebody asked kind of how long it takes, and I know that's going to vary, you know, community to community, but for you, what did that process look like, you know, to actually form the organization itself?
Sure, sure. So for us, it looked like one step at a time. It looked like us coming up with the idea, talking with Preservation Trust, seeing what possibilities were out there, looking at the specifics of our situation and what step needed to be done next. Like, we knew we couldn't go forward unless we figured out the septic system, which means
Right.
that we needed more land, which means that we needed to talk to the town about getting more land. And so we really just took it one step at a time. And I would say that we formed the nonprofit in the spring of 2018, and we purchased the building about a year later. So we started with a process, a path to a septic system. We started with community meetings around the idea and how people felt about it. We then started with, after we felt like people were in support of it, we started talking to people about fundraising. We went to fundraising retreats that Preservation Trust put on that were really helpful to show us the basics of fundraising. And like Trevor said, it's different in every community. We had several people who made some smaller donations to the project as it was starting. We had one major donor that we approached about a significant portion of the funding to buy the building outright. We knew that this is a long process and we needed to buy it outright. We didn't feel comfortable entering into any sort of mortgage. So we basically put in a grant proposal to a local family in town, and we were vetted very thoroughly by them, and we were granted the money to purchase the store, which was fantastic. And since then, we've been doing fundraising regularly and having a lot of support in the community, and we've applied for grants. We've received many grants. So far, I think we've raised over $650,000 through the whole project. So yeah, so it's time consuming, but it really is just one step at a time. And I think, people when you look at it in hindsight, it is amazing what we've accomplished, because it's a lot, and it's just one step at a time. That's all I can say. Yeah.
Well, first key takeaway advice: one step at a time.
Yeah.
And I do want to mention, and I want to hear Anne's story in Guilford, and then you all have heard Preservation Trust come up quite a bit. And after that, I'm going to have Nicole talk a little bit about the role that Preservation Trust can play, because for many of these stories around the state, that's been a key component. And just to acknowledge too, many of you probably knew Paul Braun and have worked with Paul, and just to say, like, none of this workshop, none of this work exists without the vision that Paul Braun had for the state and for the future of the villages in Vermont. And so just want to acknowledge, I still, driving around the state, think about, the impact that he had on all of our villages and even Burlington. So just want to acknowledge it's such a key part of these stories. So Anne, tell us about your story in Guilford.
It's so interesting. Thanks. It's so interesting to hear these other stories, because we kind of came at things differently, but ended up like Elmore and like Rupert, with focus on a store. But our nonprofit was formed in 2004, really in response to the fact that the village of Algiers, and there's a funny story of how that village got named Algiers, but I don't have time to tell it now. The village of Algiers really looked terrible. It was like urban blight, there could be urban blight in a town of 2,000, but it was empty houses, failing wells. The store, there was a store in the town, but it was just not doing very well. So they started their original focus, and I wasn't involved at this point, although I was on the select board, was to create a master plan just for the Village Triangle to try to revitalize and create a sense of community within that little area of Guilford. But in 2009, the owner of this store that I mentioned kind of threw in the towel. Her husband had died. It was operating, but the building was in rough shape. And she didn't want to sell it to a 7-Eleven. We have no zoning in Guilford. It's been actively rejected again and again. And so that was another reason to create this little nonprofit. But basically, Paul Brune, there he is again, said to our board at the time, "You've got to buy that store." We were like, we're not into buying buildings. He said, "No, you're buying that store. And I'm not going to shake your hand because you just won this award unless you promise you're going to buy that store." So he got actively involved. And so of course we bought this store. This is in the historic Broadbrook House. It was built in 1817. It had been a dance hall, a barbershop, a post office, a tavern over the years. So it had a lot of great history to it. And so we wrote a lot of grants. We did a lot of fundraising. We did feasibility studies, and we bought the store in the late 2009, 2010, and we needed to do a massive rehab on the interior of the store. And that didn't begin until 2012. So, but we were able to get that done. It was beautiful, a lot of help from Preservation Trust of Vermont, and the store opened in 2013. At that same time, one of the big purposes that Friends of Algiers had was cleaning up this derelict old warehouse that also had a brownfield on it. So writing a grant at that point, Eric Morris wrote this grant, got the brownfield cleaned up, got the warehouse torn down, and then sold that property to Wyndham Windsor Housing Trust. When you were talking about partnerships, they were a huge partner of ours. And they built 22 units of beautiful, energy efficient, affordable housing on that site. They also purchased an old, very dilapidated building on the corner called the Tontine House and rehabbed that into 7 really good, beautiful apartments. Now that place, I think if they had known what a mess it was, they wouldn't have gotten into it, but they did. So those are two, you talked about a few big projects, the rehab of the section that ended up with housing. And then later, after 2009-10, our focus on the store became huge, and getting an operator was hard. We had to also, because I was in the select board, when you talk about partnerships, we brought water to the village. There was no water, but we worked with the town of Brattleboro, and we worked with Commonwealth Dairy, which was right up the road, and they needed water. And so we struck a deal with those two entities. So none of this could have happened without water, obviously, but there was no town water at that point. And so we got that. So there's a lot more I could say, but I'm going to stop right there.
Okay, and we'll have more time to dig into it. And so I do want to say, I saw a question in the chat about, are there ever trusts that kind of take on multiple projects? And I think, Anne, you just answered that question. Like,
Yeah.
yes. And I think a really common thing and kind of an exciting thing that we see is oftentimes, like, several of these stories, the trust will form around one project, but then kind of remains as this ongoing organization and kind of capacity that could maybe take on future projects. We often see them, pursuing projects in the future and being able to take in funding and be a resource. But you want to say something, Anne, about that?
I do, because at this point, our store is amazing and awesome, and we have a wonderful operator. It's the model that's probably familiar to others, where we lease the space to an operator and they run it as their business, and it's doing really amazingly. But yes, Cafe Deli makes a big difference. So now we're taking on connected pathways in the village center, and we've got to deal with traffic calming. It's just terrible because we are creating a real village center, but Route 5 goes zooming right through there. As somebody said, "Oh, we're coming up on Harley season." It's like it's so I think a lot of towns in Vermont have that obstacle. It's a big, fast road going through the center of a village. So.
Yeah, and so you can see, so Anne's, that organization has been around for quite a long time now, and now, because that store is up and running and operating, they're able to maybe take on some of these other challenges that community members are raising. So so let's kind of pause on the kind of specific stories and go back to Nicole for a little bit. PTV has come up so many times. I think it would be helpful to share what can PTV do? What can you not do? Like, how are you involved in these projects?
Yeah, so you heard all three of these people have been involved with PTV and their projects have been there. And I think it was Deb that mentioned our retreats. And that is one resource that we provide that can really just kind of give you, I'm going to say like a crash course in whatever you're interested in. And so they run from May to September. They're on our website under our work and then retreats. But we take you out to the Grand Isle Lake House and we kind of like go in depth on different topics. So we have one coming up in June about community revitalization, which is all of the community trust projects. We have one in July about fundraising and project management. So there's been some questions about how do you raise substantial amounts of money for projects such as this? And that could be a good one. And then anyone that's interested in housing, we're offering a new workshop in September specifically around housing in historic buildings. And so that'll be a new one that kind of touches on some of the topics that we're talking about today. At PTV, we say that we may be a project's first and longest friend. We often try to like step right in when someone is just starting in on a project to better know their building. And from there, we really try to connect people and their projects with all the technical assistance that's needed to wrap around them. That's everything from architecture and engineering, fundraising support, helping connect you to grant writers and grant management, finding you a project manager, connecting you with other funding partners. A big piece of what we can do is help you navigate the regulatory process. And I'm going to hang that one because it's a big piece and PTV is there to help guide you through that. I'm going to say arduous step. We can also provide you with like templates and workflows that can help you just streamline things. So you're not writing out an RFP for the first time. We'll provide you with those templates just to help you along. And then we're there when things go sideways. And I wasn't with PTV when it happened, but I know that for the Elmore Community Store, the post office thing happened and PTV stepped right in to be there as a partner to advocate and support our community trust organizations. So between retreats and just always being there, I think that's how PTV is really able to help support community groups that are taking on a community trust project. And yeah, I'll leave it there.
Great. Thanks, Nicole. Yeah, and I'll just say overall, like what I've seen as a partner and kind of outsider is just PTV kind of making it feel possible, right? Like these are big projects, and as you all know, you all are in it, that these are all volunteer led. I mean, it's very rare that we have people, you know, in our communities that are experts in starting nonprofits and experts in revitalizing historic buildings. And so just to say, I've seen PTV really kind of do that hand holding in a way that really makes it tangible and possible. So going back a little bit to our stories, and I think I want to start with hearing a little bit more, because there have been some questions in the chat about kind of engagement, like community engagement, community representation, partnership. I'm curious, I'd like to hear from all the panelists, maybe challenges and successes that you've encountered in terms of engaging the community in the projects you're working on. And you mentioned partnering with the municipality. That might be interesting to hear about. And specifically, there was a question about kind of the committee itself, like who's on the committee, who's been engaged in really leading the work. So just reflections on that general topic of representation, community engagement. And I don't know if any of you wants to start. Anne, it looks like you were ready to go.
Well, as I mentioned, I was on the select board in Guilford for a long time. And so I initially got involved with Friends of Algiers, kind of thinking we should have a liaison. What are they doing? And to find out about it. And I started attending their meetings and I just got very excited by the work. And so I very quickly shifted from watching as a select board member to joining the board. But I think that connection with the municipality was really helpful. However, there were things the municipality was not willing to take on. Understandably, some municipalities I know buy property. Ours was like, no way, we're not doing that. So Friends of Algiers bought this derelict property, and that's part was the initiative to have that formed. But it made it easy to form partnerships around, for example, the water line with Brattleboro, and Commonwealth Dairy is a huge yogurt producer. Green Mountain Yogurt is made there. So it was a conduit. I think if you can get somebody in your municipal government who is on board and use that connection, it really can make a big difference. So it did for us.
Great. Trevor or Deb, do you have reflections on that kind of community engagement side of things? Go ahead, Deb.
Yeah, I think we've had connections with our select board. We're a pretty small town too. There's only about 700 people in Rupert, and our select board has been supportive of the project, but like a lot of towns, very fiscally conservative. So not willing to purchase land or things like that, but they did give us a pathway to use some of their land. We're right now in the process of working with them for an easement for our well that we need. We need a new well because of our new septic system. We purchased land from the town right next to the store so that we have space to put our new septic system. Hopefully both of those things will be happening this year. We also worked with the town on a community development block grant, which the town facilitated for us. So the town basically applies for the grant, but the grant was for Rupert Village Trust to do planning. So the town acted as a pass-through for the grant for us, and they were willing to do that. So it was they have been supportive, and I think for us too, a lot of community partnerships look like community partnering with churches, library, fire department for social activities, because we're about bringing people together. So if the library is having a book sale, we try to do something the same day so that there's more than one thing to do in Rupert. And so those kinds of partnerships help to broaden the variety of people that are coming to programming. Someone might not even realize that we're doing something on the same day as the library, but they're there and then they find out about us. So, and the same thing with the churches, and we're all in very close physical proximity to each other. So those are some of the ways that we've engaged with partnerships and getting people together.
Great, thank you. And just to highlight one piece of what you were just saying, because I think it's an important one to note, that the community trust itself, right, is creating this kind of capacity outside of municipal government, and they're a 501c3 organization. There was a question in the chat about the difference between a nonprofit 501c3 and a trust. It really is, a trust is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that has a mission that's a specific mission focused on the community, but so that they can take in funding like any 501c3. But Deb mentioned this important partnership with the municipality, because they're working and have a friendly relationship. They were able to access funds that the municipality had to apply for, right? So now there's a mutual benefit, that there's funds the municipality can't apply for that they can, and funds that they can apply for the municipality can't. So it's a kind of mutual benefit there. So thanks for bringing that up. Trevor, do you want to share a little bit of your experience in Elmore with that community engagement side of things?
Yeah, and I can sort of speak to that the challenge that we had that Nicole mentioned about the post office. Related to that, so within 3 weeks of us acquiring the store, the U.S. Postal Service reached out and let us know that they would be ending the Elmore post office that exists in the center of the Elmore store, and is the probably the main driver of traffic into the store, and has been for 200 years. And what's worse is it was like on our watch. So we came in and bought the building, and a few weeks later, we are the reason that the post office is leaving. So it was alarming, and we panicked for a couple days. We reached out to Ben Doyle at PTV within a couple hours, I think. And like Nicole said, there was a lot of hand-holding, but also some very real support of reaching out to the congressional delegation. So it was a combination of working with PTV and our congressional delegates, and doing a lot of grassroots outreach into the community. So there's 100 post office boxes in the store. But in the end, we had over 300 people in the town, in the county, and all over the US writing letters to the Postmaster General in support of keeping the post office open. And it was a stressful time for us and not what we were hoping to do at the beginning of our tenure with the building. But it was a really good opportunity to have that outreach with the community and show the community why a post office in the middle of the town is important and in the middle of this general store. And why it's important to have this connection, and why it's important to have a institution like a community trust, because we could gather the support from PTV, from the congressional delegation. We could gather the support from the community to write the letters, make the phone calls. We had a rally with now Senator Welch right in front of the store with the first and second graders from the school next door. And it ended up being a kind of a positive thing in the end, but it was only possible from having that community support and just doing a lot of outreach to everybody in the community, not just the folks that were immediately affected by the potential closure of the post office.
The things you never expect to be involved in when you sign up for a volunteer role in your community. Wow. So I think I'm gonna actually shift to some of the questions before I get to my final questions for the panelists, because there's actually a lot being covered in the questions that I would love to cover. And actually, Ben, in Roxbury, you went where I was going to go next as well. I'm curious to hear challenges on the community engagement side. Like, have any of you encountered, I think I think we've all probably encountered in our communities this dynamic right now where, there may be some really pushing for action or progress or change in some way, and we're seeing some real resistance in communities, right? To like, is that really who we are? Is that really what we want to see for our future? Have any of you encountered pushback to the goals that the community trust has set out, and how have you addressed that? And it looks like you have.
Yeah, I mean, when you said that, I was thinking right away about the effort we made partnering with Wyndham Windsor Housing Trust around the housing. And sadly, in Vermont, there's a lot of prejudice, a lot of concern about those poor people. And with those poor people comes unspoken but clear people of color. And so that there was resistance to the idea of low-income housing in the center of the village. Wyndham Windsor Housing Trust, I'm sure this is true of other housing trusts around the state, is an amazing landlord, and they do a great job managing. The property's great. They can take good care of their tenants and keep people, in line in that sense. But there was quite a bit of community resistance to the concept of low-income housing in the village. And this sounds kind of weird, but basically we said, well, you didn't want zoning. Hello, it's sort of, we could do what we want. So there was just that there wasn't active formal resistance because there was no avenue for it. But yeah.
Trevor or Deb, did you experience anything like that?
Yeah, I think for us, we're a pretty small town where our separation seems to come down is like in a lot of places in Vermont, people who are new to the town and people who have lived here forever. So there can be a little bit of us and them in terms of new people versus people who've been here a long time. We haven't had a lot of active resistance to what we're doing, but we are really trying to work on having more participation from people who have lived here a long time. And we're slowly garnering it. For people who are new to town, they're really excited about what we're doing because we're providing a place for them to come and meet people. So they're very excited about it. And some of the people who have lived here forever are also feeling that. And I'm finding for us, it's slow and steady, sometimes one person at a time, one group at a time. Talking with the churches, we do a coffee hour every Saturday morning, and having one of the organizations, whether it's one of the churches or the fire department, have sort of a coffee takeover, if you will, so that their organization comes in and is providing the volunteers for that Saturday. We're working on things like that. And because we are a small town, sometimes it really is one person at a time. But we're slowly, just by doing the work, by being welcoming to everyone that comes in and reaching out in every way that we can think of, we're slowly making progress on that front.
Trevor?
Yeah, very similar in Elmore. There are definitely folks that have been around for generations, and like things the way they are. And we were a board of pretty young people coming in who most of us grew up in Elmore, but still young, with new ideas. But we realized that to really reach out, or the best way of reaching out is to just get some of those good old boys and good old gals and get them on the board. And that made a big difference. I think there's also a little bit of contention with other organizations that are in the community that have been around a while. And I don't know if they would feel threatened by a new organization that's sort of wielding this power of the largest business in town. But we do our best to reach out, and work with them when there are events in the town. And it sounds like other groups have had good luck with the municipalities, but our select board really hasn't been very supportive of our work. For whatever reason, I think there's a concern about any appearance of supporting a private business, and they don't seem to want to separate the trust as a nonprofit organization that owns the building from the store that is a for-profit business that rents the building. So that has been difficult at times, and we haven't been able to get the support that we hoped for. But we manage, and over time, I think we're doing our best to sort of win the hearts and minds of the people in power in the community, and we're slowly eroding their doubt.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Trevor. I imagine that's not an uncommon story, that there might be some tension there with the local leadership. So that's important to acknowledge. Another question I'd love to hear from our panelists, and Nicole, I'm saving some of the more technical ones for you in a moment. But there is a question that I think would be important to reflect on. Rebecca asked about the workload and I mean, these are major projects, and they're primarily volunteer led. And I'd love to hear your reflections on how this has been manageable by a volunteer committee. What resources have you drawn on to make it manageable? You've all accomplished the project that you at least initially set out to accomplish, and I'm curious your reflections on how that's worked, and I don't have any of you drawn on consultant or paid help in some way outside of the volunteer support. Anne, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, not specifically about the consultant piece, but one thing that I think we're at a little bit of a problem right now. Many of the people on our board, which is a large active board, but frankly, are older, like me, are retired and have time. And so part of my effort has been to get younger people involved, but people look at the work we've done and they get intimidated. Feels like a lot of work, and they've got kids and families. So there's that little, the thing about bridging the gap between people who have full active employed lives and trying to I mean, we're done with their huge project, which was the store, but I'm finding board recruitment a little challenging just because of how busy people's lives are right now, especially people working in with kids. So
Yeah. Other reflections on that question from Trevor or Deb?
Yeah, it is a challenge. We have a pretty small board, and especially the most active members of the board are pretty small. We have a board of 5, and there's really 3 of us that have been doing the majority of the process with other volunteers that are involved. So they're not necessarily on the board, but still actively involved in the project. We have used consultants, and it has been worth every single penny that we have spent on consultants. So we have worked with a development consultant to help us with grants and grant writings, particularly municipal and federal grants. I personally think it's essential. Unless you want it to be your full-time job, and I consider myself a pretty intelligent, savvy person, and navigating particularly the federal grants is immensely time consuming. And so that has been wonderful. Last year, we also hired a consultant to do social media, redo our website, things like that really increased our presence and allowed us to draw in a lot more people who hadn't been involved in the project. That person now took on a full-time job, and we've recently hired another consultant to do that work and also help us with the programming, because we are finding that the time involved in moving the project forward, so working on raising the money for that addition that we need and the renovations that we need, is one track that needs to be worked on, as well as having a public presence and doing events and programming. And we're just not able to handle all of it. So we are hiring somebody to help with the programming and social media part of it, publicity. We also are working on actively recruiting some new board members as well, so that we can share the load, so that it does become sustainable, because it's important that it's a marathon, not a sprint. So it's important to, for everyone to be honest about what they're able to do and not able to do, and keep it sustainable.
Yeah. Just a follow-up question, Deb. When you talk about hiring these consultants, where is the funding coming from for that primarily? Do you have kind of funds raised that you're able to spend on that, or are you applying to places like Ready with specific grants to cover those? What's your approach?
It's a little of both. It's a little of both.
Okay.
We started with a Ready grant, and that helped us with, and you all can help me with the acronym.
So the Ready grants are so the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. Mariah might even be on this call somewhere, who runs that program. So the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board runs a program called Ready, which is REDI, the Rural Economic Development Initiative. And that's some pretty unique funding that can help to hire consultants to do things like write and help to manage grants. So it sounds like you've taken advantage of some of that.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've taken advantage of that, and that has been critical in terms of grant funding, working with grants. I mean, it has been essential, and showed us how essential it is to have that funding, and to once the Ready grants are up, that we need to find funding for that, because it's essential. So the Ready grant was really critical for us at the beginning, and throughout, even within the HUD grant that we were doing with the town, the planning grant. So that part has been important. And then I think just by having that funding and showing us how much further we can move by hiring out some of this work, has been really enlightening, and shows us that by raising the money to do that, it is exponentially increasing the work that we are able to do. Really important.
Great. Quick follow-up, and then I want to hear from Trevor as well. The Ready grant, I think this is interesting for folks to hear. Like, at what stage were you when you applied for the Ready grant? Like, did you have a fully formed vision and you were ready to execute, and you kind of had to be at that readiness phase, or like, where were you in the formation of next steps when you applied for that grant?
Right. It was pretty early on. But we had purchased the building. So we had a vision, we had a plan, and we needed to figure out where to go next. But it was pretty early on in the process, and it was incredibly helpful and informative. Allowed us to we have an idea. It's different than a plan. So
Yeah.
it helped us to get to more of the plan. So it was really important. Yeah.
Yeah. Trevor, what's your experience been with that kind of like volunteer capacity versus hired help? What does that look like for you?
Well, I would say I'm feeling kind of dumb that we haven't had consultants coming to help us with things at this point from hearing from Deb and Ann. We've been doing it all ourselves. Our board is pretty big. We've got around 9 or 10 people, and it is a pretty active board. For the work that we do and for the makeup of the board, everybody has at least one full-time job, and it is a young board, so everybody's got families, and it's that old thing of like, if you need something done, find the busiest person in the area, and they'll get it done. So yeah, it's just a lot of hands-on work for us, like literally hands-on fixing toilets sometimes and digging trenches. When we've got projects going on. We did take on a septic replacement project funded from a grant from PTV, and that was a pretty substantial and involved project. And we managed it all ourselves, and it was a lot of work at times, like 20 hours a week sometimes, in addition to having a full-time job for some of us. And we should have gotten a consultant to help us do that work. I wouldn't say that I guess it was possible, but I wouldn't advise, I guess, because it really limited the other things that we could do. And I see somebody asking about Deb, where she found her consultants. The Elmore Community Trust does call dibs on Deb's consultants first before anybody else gets to them. So just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that. Yeah, I think making it clear to board members that come on what the expectations are helps. And if you're looking for specific amount of work, making that clear so it's fair to both sides, so the person doesn't come in and realize after the fact that they've gotten in over their heads. And also there's no frustration on the rest of the board with somebody not carrying their weight. And it is fun and interesting to work on this stuff. So it really hasn't been difficult to find board members who are like hot and ready to go with some of the work that we've got. But we've all got our lives. So when there are crises at the store or at the building, it's sometimes difficult to try to juggle everything you've got going on.
Yeah. Thanks, Trevor. And just to the question of where consultants are found, I'm happy to have panelists respond, but also one nice thing about that READY program is they do kind of have a pool of consultants and kind of help make those connections. And PTV, of course, has strong connections with qualified contractors and consultants as well. Nicole, I'm going to come to you with some more technical questions in the chat. I want to thank Kate McCarthy for addressing that foundation versus trust. There was another question about a trust, the difference between a trust and a nonprofit. Can one do something that the other can't do? Do you want to touch on that, Nicole? How to distinguish those?
They're in short, they're the same thing. But I will say that as you form your community trust, it's really quick and easy to get your trust set up in the state of Vermont. But to get the federal designation as a 501c3, it's a little bit of a lengthy process. Find a consultant to help you with that because it's a beast. So there is this little bit of like a weird window where your community trust is established and identified by the state, and you're waiting for that federal piece. And there's different things that you can do. Basically, your community trust, until you're identified by the federal government, can't take in donations yet. So you'll often have to have a fiscal sponsor. But that is stuff that PTV can support you with when you get to that phase. So there are some slight differences, but all in all, a 501c3 and community trust are synonymous in the end.
Great. So sticking with you, Nicole, there's a question about, you mentioned like templates that PTV has. and a question about in the town being kind of wary of purchasing the nonprofit wary of purchasing a building, concerned about hitting cost issues, and asking, does PTV have a kind of a roadmap that helps boards with their due diligence? They're looking for a model they can use to evaluate feasibility.
Yes, so we do have a roadmap that kind of guides you through how to understand your building, how to build your local capacity. And it often starts with a conditions assessment of the building, and that will help you know what else do you need to know about this space, and what else do you need to take into consideration to see if it's a feasible project. Yeah, there is a roadmap.
Excellent. Let's see. Lauren, do you have others that are kind of more on the
Yeah, there are, well, just a quick plug to folks who are starting to look at a physical project. As Elizabeth Nance pointed out in the chat, reach out to your local RPCs who can help you find resources that are appropriate to like assessing a building and understanding what the planning is like, regulations are like in your region. I'd also point you to our recent workshop with Jenna Lapachinsky from Preservation Trust of Vermont, which was Project Management 101. So all those questions like, oh, we're looking at a project, we're looking for a roadmap, that's where you should go. And I put the YouTube link in the chat, but I'll also put it in the email that we send out to folks. So that's a really good place. There were quite a few more questions about fundraising. Yeah, what role have local businesses played in fundraising? What platforms do people use for managing their fundraising? That kind of, in-kind donations.
I agree. I've seen a lot, and honestly, there's actually like quite a few questions, like kind of interested if you're willing to share the scale of the kind of total cost of these projects that you took on, and also not just about the kind of project itself, but also the ongoing expenses for property management, maintenance, legal fees, that kind of thing. I wonder, we kind of go through the panelists and kind of whatever you're open and willing to share about the scale of the project and the fundraising that you took on, and how the kind of ongoing costs and sustainability play into to that. Does anyone want to take that first? Go ahead, Anne.
Sure. First of all, we bought the building and we have a big mortgage still. So that's an ongoing cost. We have income that's generated from the store, the lease of the store. We have 2 apartments upstairs in the building and a second business and almost a third in the building. It's a good sized building. Our goal is to have our income cover our expenses, and we're not quite there yet. We do an annual appeal every year, fundraising appeal to the community, also acts as a newsletter. We did a lot of grant writing early on and some recently. I feel like we need to do another hit of grant writing. We need to get a new roof. You know, there are always expenses of an old building. But we've raised, I don't have the numbers. I didn't pull those numbers in front of me, but well over 500,000, between 500,000 and $1 million over the course of, but you know, we've been in existence a long time. So, so we've raised money. We've used angels in the community, big donors. We've used grants, and we actually did use a consultant about where to go after grants, but we had grant writing expertise on our board. So we've written our own grants. So our expenses were pretty huge. This building cost us, again, well over $500,000 just to do the rehab on the building, both the apartments and the store. Old buildings are money pits, and we've spent a lot, so we've had to raise a lot. So that's not, I'm not being very precise. Sorry, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but it's been a mishmash of funding sources. And then, you know, we're close to having our expenses covered by our income. But that's our goal.
Trevor, how about you? Do you have a sense of the scale of the costs and also what local partners versus grants and so forth that you brought in?
Yeah, so the septic project that when before we bought the building, we had a grand plan of renovating the whole building. We knew the foundation needed to be replaced. We knew it needed new septic. We knew it needed some roof work. We wanted to renovate the interior for community space. So we started looking at, oh, we'll just get a lot of money and we'll do all this work in one shot. It won't be as disruptive. And then uh, we realized that, well, and then we got hit with the post office thing, and we were like, let's dial things back and take some more manageable, smaller steps, like Deb mentioned. So we focused on the septic, and that was about an $80,000 project that was grant funded through a grant from PTV. And then just day-to-day operations in our model, like others, we have a triple net lease with the operator who rents the entire building, actually. So triple net in our case means that the operator pays for the property tax, the insurance, everything really, the sort of the maintenance of the building to a small degree. And in turn, we actually don't really charge any rent to the operator. And they also get income from renting out a apartment space, 2 apartment spaces. And that's their new operator, and we just wanted to make sure there wasn't any barriers to them succeeding as a business. We do cover a lot of the larger maintenance on the building. We've had to replace furnaces and hot water heaters, and we've got this roof. And that's just what comes with having a 200-year-old building. But we do try to make sure we've got like 50,000 in the bank at any point. And if it's a larger project, we start looking at grant opportunities or people in the community that have some affiliation with the issue that we're trying to solve if they have a business. That doesn't always work, but we try. We hold fundraising events every year that actually bring in quite a bit of capital. And we started a membership. We don't call it membership. It's a rooted donor program. So sustaining donors, they can sign up to give on a monthly basis. And that just started, and we hope that'll help us with ongoing expenses just for the general fund for our organization to cover those things. Yeah, but in terms of the bigger stuff, we're trying to be more strategic about what we take on and when, and it's tough. Sometimes we've struggled with getting grant funding and being awarded it, and then not having all of the project in place to be able to utilize the funding right away, which is not always common, but for us, we had some other things come up. So we sometimes are in a position to rush to try to get work done to take advantage of this grant funding that we were awarded. And also trying to hold off other board members from getting more grants for other projects that we haven't even started yet. So it's a balance, but you always do try to get things moving and plan ahead, so you aren't being reactive.
Right. Thanks. That's super helpful, Trevor. Deb, I don't think we've heard from you yet on the kind of fundraising and ongoing expenses.
Yeah, I think Trevor brings up some really good points about grants. A lot of times I feel like people come into these projects and think that the grant money is sort of easier fundraising, and it's different types of fundraising and has its own set of challenges. So I don't have exact numbers in front of me, but I was jotting some notes. We've raised over 650,000 about right now to date. I would say about 200,000 of that has come from state and federal grants. Another probably 150 or so from sort of private grants. And the rest of it has been community fundraising. And we do annual fundraiser every year. We do a mailing every year. That so far has been what has been keeping our ongoing costs covered, and some of the smaller projects that we're doing in terms of just maintenance and things to the building. one of the challenges that that I think is not always understood as you go into particularly federal grants and even state grants is that they cost a lot to do in as well, in that you have to do things that you wouldn't necessarily have to do if you didn't have the grant. And as well as you can't use in-kind donations with most of those grants as well. So if you have a local contractor who's willing to donate some of their services, that often is very difficult to incorporate into a federal grant, I have found in our situations. So that if you have some private funding, there are a lot of ways that sometimes you can make that funding go further in terms of matching with local businesses who might be willing to donate some services. Federal and state grants are really, really great at vetting your project and proving that you can do it. And it shows that you have the chops to be able to manage those things, which, as Trevor said, is challenging in terms of timing and getting what you need done in the amount of time, and balancing it all in terms of what you need to do for the grant and how your logistics tie into that. So yeah, it's a lot.
It is. Thank you, Deb. The key takeaway from today, it's a lot. It's possible, but it's a lot. I know we've got 15 minutes left. I know there are more questions that I want to get. I had more questions too that I want to get to, but I do want to make sure we have time to at least give a quick overview of the upcoming Village Trust initiative that we're going to be launching with Vermont Community Foundation and Preservation Trust of Vermont. I think for many of you that might be kind of in early stages or even later stages of this kind of work, it might be a helpful resource. So again, we don't have all of the details, but we can give you a sneak peek of the program, and I'll have Nicole just share a little bit more about what that's going to look like and how it might help.
Thank you, Jenna. I'm going to backtrack just one step just to kind of give the framework of where this even came from, because I jumped into PTV and this was like a thing. And I was like, well, why? How did we even get here? And once I heard it, I was like, this is a pretty impactful program that we're hoping to do. So we know that Vermont is changing. We see population in migration to some places. We're experiencing the effects of climate change. We have aging communities, shrinking schools, but it's now more than ever that we're seeing communities really trying to address things together. And so this program is really to help our smallest communities create and invigorate those essential elements that bring people together and help those people in those communities thrive. What we're seeing and what we're thinking about is that these are going to be those projects that are our general stores, small scale village housing, childcare and community centers, community cafes, but we're really open to your other ideas. We want to be able to find those projects that are intricately woven into what your community is identifying as a need within a space within your villages. It is a partnership with VCRD, PTV, and VCF. That's a lot of acronyms, but we can type them out for you. And we're going to be providing those wraparound services to help move these projects along. So Vermont Council on Rural Development is a facilitation team, and they're going to help with that community engagement and visioning. PTV will be stepping in to really support the project development and the navigation of the regulatory process, which you heard some of our panelists talk about. And then Vermont Community Foundation is really going to be there to support throughout the project, but help establish a dedicated fund for that community trust that lives at Vermont Community Foundation. So the sneak peek part, this is what you've all been waiting for. If you're thinking about applying to the Village Trust Initiative, again, it hasn't launched yet, but it will be soon. There are these like criterion of eligibility that you just need to be aware of. The most critical one is that we're measuring by town. So it's not a village, it's not a village within a town, by your town. Anyone that would like to apply, you have to have less than 2,500 people per the 2020 census. So look it up. Sadly, if you're 2,501, you are not eligible. So check your numbers. That's the first benchmark for eligibility. The second one is that your community or your group has to have the interest in forming a community trust, or if there's one that's already present, thinking about bolstering it to take on something new. So that's the next one. The third one is that these will be physical projects. And so your potential project will need to have a historic resource involved or a site that is within the village environment. This does include brownfields. Brownfields are an eligible site, but a greenfield development, like brand new, never been touched grounds, that would not be eligible. And this project is not focusing on outdoor recreation. So if you're looking to create, I don't know, trails or park spaces, this is not really the type of funding that this is looking to support. I guess kind of keep that thought of like revitalization in the forefront, that this is really intended to bring something back to your existing cluster area in your village. Other little nitty-gritty ones, these ones aren't as important, but you will need to have a select board letter of endorsement. That doesn't mean that they're stepping into the project, but they're there by your side and they're willing to like let you guys move forward and make this project happen. And then finally, we'll need to see that your project has a pathway towards site control of the building or the site. So that could be that you demonstrate that the landholder is willing to sell it to you or willing to lease it to you. Don't go out and do those things yet. Don't buy or lease, but just kind of demonstrate that you have that pathway there for you. And then finally, as many people mentioned today, there is that regulatory process. And so we just want to be communicating, and we will go into depth with people that come into this, but just knowing that there's strings attached with any funding that you're going to be getting, and those strings are really important. And so we'll help guide you, but you have to be willing to move within those parameters of the project. Yes. And then I just wanted to end, Jenna, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
If you're not eligible, let's just say you are that town that's 2,501 people. I don't want you to be discouraged from not like venturing on in a project. And so if that is you, please reach out to PTV and VCRD. There are other ways that we can be supporting you and being of assistance to get your project and community ready. If you're thinking about your project and it wasn't quite lining up with what we're looking for, you know, there's an opportunity to shift your lens and reach back out to your community, re-engage with what the community is doing. I also want to just put in the pitch of like partnering with neighboring communities. You may find that your community is too big, but your neighboring community works with you and they may be a really great partner in this that's helping the whole area. A lot of our Vermont communities, you know, you're not just boxed into one area. And then finally, if you're like the huge outlier, there's nothing from stopping you from forming a community trust on your own and just marching forth. And you see from our panelists today that it can be done, and lean on them. I know Trevor and Deb would, I'm going to put you out there, guys. You're going to take a call and support someone else as they embark on this journey. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. So with just a kind of a few minutes left here, I'll open it up for other questions or comments or thoughts. We've got to a lot of the questions in the chat. Oh, and did we say timing, Nicole, on when we expect the Village Trust Initiative to launch?
We want to make sure we launch something good. So just expect it this spring. So I'm not going to go into any more finite of that, but we want to make sure that we're launching something out that rolls well. And so we're really just polishing the rock right now so that it can just like fly right through. So soon.
Yeah. And I think really important to think of this process that Nicole's mentioned as program, right? Like it's a little different from applying for grant funds. Like, yes, there are grant funds, which is very exciting. Thank you, former Senator Leahy, for making these funds available. But it's also meant to provide technical assistance, support, partnership. And so we're not actually looking for, you know, perfect, ready to fund projects. We're actually looking for projects that have a lot of potential, but might need some extra support or help, whether it's community engagement or something more on the consulting or technical assistance side, or something, navigating the legal structure of forming a 501c3, like we want to bring these resources to you. And so it's a bit of a unique application process. And a great question in the chat. This program is a multi-year initiative. The funding is available to us, I believe, for 8 years. I think we're intending kind of a 4 or 5. Is that right? Year initiative, Nicole? The point is, yeah, so the point is, no, this is not a one-time use it or lose it kind of thing. We're going to be looking for a kind of diverse portfolio of projects in the first year, but then we'll be opening it up again. And so it's a chance, like Nicole said, like, if not this year, reach out to us and we can, help think with you about ways to get further along in your project. For example, the Vermont Council on Rural Development runs our community visit engagement program. We also have the ability to do some facilitation through the municipal technical assistance programs. We actually have more availability to do facilitation for municipalities that qualify on that MTAP list, which we can share in the chat maybe, so you can see if your community is on it. But that to say, if you feel like you're not quite sure if the community's there in terms of being ready to, go for a community trust or launch a project, we might be able to provide some support in that facilitation and community engagement side of things. So reach out. Any last questions? Anne, you've got a hand raised. Go ahead.
Big plug for the community visit program. The Rural Council on Rural Development had a community visit in Guilford in 2013. It was a game changer for our community. And I really think anybody who does it, you're going to get so much from it. I just wanted to thank Preservation Trust as well as Vermont Council on Rural Development. You really have changed the nature of Guilford. But it's also really fun to see all these people passionate about their little towns and wanting to make them better and more cohesive communities. I just love that. So that's what's involved me. And it's great to see all these people putting a lot of energy into villages, little towns. So.
Thank you, Anne. And maybe this question sounds self-serving, but it's coming from the chat and not from me. Somebody was just curious how the community visit program was a game changer. Like, what role did that play in Guilford?
It started us thinking cohesively about our goals as a town. We got involved thinking, oh, money, but it wasn't about money. It was about, what do you want to see? What are your focuses and foci, whatever. And, so we really developed goals around childcare and around community center that fed into the store as a community gathering place. I haven't said that enough, but I've heard that from both Deb and Trevor. The store's big focus for us is it's a place for community to gather. The school was, so we developed this awareness of what we needed to do to make our community more vital and more cohesive. And it just those conversations that we had through that year-long process were incredibly energizing. That's not very specific, but boy, what a great thing it was. It made us think differently about community.
Thanks, Anne. Well, let's take the last couple minutes to just to close. I would love to hear, Anne, it's nice to hear kind of your closing thoughts. I don't know, Deb and Trevor, I'd love to hear from you, like thoughts on closing thoughts, especially on like, what do you hope is kind of coming next for your organization? What do you see for the future for your community trust? And we only have 4 minutes, so a minute on what do you see for the future?
I'll be quick. We are hopefully facilitating our grant this year to put a new septic system and well, which are big parts of moving our project forward. We're also preparing to launch a major capital campaign so that we can put on that addition to go forward with eventually getting a cafe in there. So it's a lot of big things on the horizon. And I just will sum up a little bit on our end of similar things to what Anne said. Preservation Trust has been essential for us and for me personally to move this project forward. They showed me that it could be done. They showed me that it's been done in other places and we could do it here. And it's one of the reasons why I really love sharing about this project, because other projects were inspiration for us, and we want to be inspiration for other projects. And the retreats and resources that are provided are essential in just showing you how it can be done. So good luck, everybody.
Thanks. Trevor, last thoughts from you?
Yeah, I'll echo the sentiments about PTV. They've been great from the beginning. The financial support has been critical, but also, like Ann and Debra said, the hand holding and back rubbing when we're panicking about something has been more useful than the money. Just knowing that like we're not alone and we'll be able to get through whatever issue has come up, and knowing that they share our vision for our community to a large extent. If the Elmore store had gone away, it would have been devastating to the town and the community. It's kind of what keeps people together. And being in a position to make sure it's around, we feel kind of honored to be in that place and fortunate to have support from the community and from folks, from partners like PTV and other folks at the state.
Great. Well, thank you all. Yes, so Lauren just put this in the chat, but just a reminder that this recording will go out to everyone who signed up. And we can send some other resources and materials. I just want to thank Nicole and Preservation Trust generally for being such an awesome partner on this workshop and all the work that we get to do together. And Deb and Trevor, just you are all tireless leaders in your community, but still managed to show up for an hour-and-a-half workshop today. So just deeply appreciate your time and leadership. And thank you to everyone that joined. It really is like, I can't even say enough how much joy it brings me to see all these like familiar faces and new faces on this call. Just love this opportunity to get together with you all and reach out to us. If you're interested in that Village Trust initiative, make sure you're following either the Council on Rural Development or the Preservation Trust's email lists. You can find them on our website, and we'll be sharing so you won't miss it. But if you have questions about it, certainly reach out to Nicole or to VCRD ahead of time. And we're here to help. So reach out anytime. But thank you so much. Have a good weekend, everyone. And we'll be in touch with follow-up soon. Take care.